Hello, welcome to the channel. So, in this series, we'll be looking into GKE in detail. So, this is the first video in the series, which is more of a introduction to GKE. What is GKE and different options and editions of GKE that's available for usage from Google. So let's start with first. Let's start with what is GKE, right? Uh, GKE is nothing but it's a Google offering of Kubernetes, right? So it's called as Google Kubernetes Engine. In short, it is GKE. You might see GKE in most of the spaces instead of the long abbreviation, right? Uh, so yeah, that's what GKE is, Google's Kubernetes Engine. Uh, so GKE is nothing but Google's own implementation of the Kubernetes open source container orchestration platform. So basically, Kubernetes is a container orchestration platform. So Google has developed it in house and then they made it open source. So Google Kubernetes right now is being maintained as an open source technology, and Google on their own cloud, which is Google Cloud Platform, they have their own implementation and feature sets available for Kubernetes, which they call as Google Kubernetes Engine. So yeah, so basically, as I mentioned, Google developed uh, Kubernetes. So Kubernetes was uh, drawn out of Borg, which is an in-house cluster management system at Google. So Borg is more or less similar to how Kubernetes is if you go and read about it in the internet. So there is a control plane which manages your worker nodes, which is the data plane, uh, you can say. So there is a control plane which manages the operations and schedules jobs, workloads that run on the work nodes, the data plane nodes. All right. So that's how Bog was, and then based on the learnings from Bog, Google created Kubernetes, and then uh, they offered it as open source for the community to have use it and keep developing features for it. Right. So yeah, Big is basically a simplified Kubernetes implementation in Google Cloud Platform, offering benefits of reduced cluster level operational management. So basically, GKE, it's very easy for you to use, unlike vanilla Kubernetes, wherein you have to uh, do a lot of configurations by your own. You have to touch individual components. You have to configure a lot of things with respect to each and every components that's part of the Kubernetes Kubernetes environment, right? So, while comparing to vanilla Kubernetes, if in case you have used it or you are using it right now and you would like to get into using GKE, GKE is much more flexible. It has things ironed out a lot. It's easy to create a Google Kubernetes cluster. Um and you can have one cluster created in 5 to 10 minutes. uh, if you want a simple cluster for your testing purpose, or you would like to run a container on a cluster and then do some simple checks, it's very easy for you to create a GKE cluster. So you can also use gcloud CLI on Cloud Shell or your own local shell, and then you just run a simple uh, gcloud container cluster create command with couple of other options. It's like cluster name and then the region or zone which you would like the cluster to be created, and then in the next 5 to 10 minutes you will have a up and running Kubernetes cluster where you can deploy your workloads and then uh, start testing your applications, right? If that's your that's what you want to do. It's an easy thing. Google has ironed out a lot of things. Uh, there are a lot of nuances when you use a vanilla Kubernetes, right? So yeah, that's it's a great technology, right? Uh, yeah, so basically GKE on GCP is offered with additional features enabling simplified management of complex Kubernetes setups, right? Basically GKE is offered in two editions. We'll take look at it in detail in further slides. So basically, that's a standard edition, and there is a enterprise edition. So with the enterprise edition, you get a lot of additional features which you can make use of, and uh, manage your Kubernetes environments at scale very easily. So uh, a lot of things have been abstracted out, and you don't have to uh, do a lot of hard work if you have a large set of Kubernetes clusters or large quantity of workloads hosted on Kubernetes, uh, wherein you have to do a lot of operational stuffs, and you need more time invested in maintaining your workloads or performing any maintenance and stuffs. GKE Enterprise has a lot of things sorted out. So yeah, we'll talk about it brief in the next slides. So let me go to the next slide. So yeah, so basically we'll discuss about modes of operation in GKE here. So there are two operation modes. One is autopilot mode, which Google recommends, and there is a standard mode. So, what is autopilot mode? So, which Google recommends, right? So, autopilot mode is nothing but you create a GKE cluster in an autopilot mode. You don't have to specifically configure a lot of things around it. All right, so it's very extracted. It's very easy to create an autopilot cluster. You don't have to uh, individually configure your create your node pool, uh, configure put in the configurations for that node pool. So all those things are taken out in autopilot mode. So Google manages everything, all of these stuffs in the backend. So you just have to create the cluster, and then you uh, proceed with deploying your workloads, and uh, Google will automatically choose a node pool set based on the resources you're requesting, and then it will host your workloads on the node pools. There are options for you to request for specific set of compute types as well. We'll see more about it when we go in depth into the autopilot cluster configuration and how to deploy workloads to autopilot cluster, and more in detail in further videos. All right, so this is pretty much about autopilot cluster. It's nothing but it's much more extracted way of running workloads in GKE, Kubernetes workloads in GKE, right? So yeah, so uh, that's what. So here you see it's a fully managed cluster wherein Google manages the underlying infrastructure and the configuration. So the level of interaction for you to uh, create a cluster and manage the cluster will be very minimal if you are using an autopilot cluster. So everything in the backend is managed by Google, and you don't have to worry about any operational overheads in managing the GKE cluster. So that's autopilot mode for you. So but with this level of extraction you also have to pay extra bucks for your GKE cluster, which comes with easy management and stuff, right? Since Google takes care of it, you have to pay extra bucks for it. So we'll look into it in more detail in the video where we'll discuss about the pricing details for the GKE. That's autopilot for you, and then standard mode. Standard mode is pretty much uh, you can create your cluster with your own set of configurations put in, like the core settings, like you can input uh, the node locations, like for example, if you are creating a uh, regional cluster and you would like the node pools to be hosted in a certain availability zones, you can do that with standard modes. The abstractions are limited out here so that you have your own uh, set of configurations for your GKE cluster based on your requirement. So you get to manage the underlying infrastructure setup, like the node pools, the node pool uh, configurations, like what's the minimum number of nodes, maximum number of nodes, whether you need auto scaling setup for a node pool. You can have one set of node pool with auto scaling enabled, the other set without having any auto scaling. If in case you have a standard set of workloads that only have uh, uh, yeah, a certain limit of load to that services, right? So those kind of different configurations you can uh, have with the standard cluster. So, uh, but irrespective of what mode you choose, your control plane is the managed one. Only the data plane where you have different set of node pools for your workloads, you get to make your own custom configurations for that. Control plane is completely managed by Google, and Google takes care of uh, patching the control plane nodes or upgrades, Kubernetes version upgrades for control planes. Everything Google takes care of it. For the control plane, uh, you get control over the node pools, the data plane, right? So the node pools you get access, complete control over it. You can do the upgrades whenever you want. You can uh, uh, stop the upgrades from happening, and as long as there is support for the Kubernetes version that you're running on, right? So those kind of extra configurations you will be able to uh, do with a standard mode cluster. So yeah, the standard mode cluster comes with uh, reduced pricing than the autopilot cluster. So since you are taking some of the operational workload here, so the price is also less, right? So uh, uh, yeah, so that's pretty much about the standard mode GKE cluster. So mode of operation. So let's move to the next slide wherein we'll discuss about the architecture. Right. So this is a uh, overview of the GKE architecture. So like this is an extracted view, right? So basically, so this piece is your GKE cluster. This box. So uh, as I mentioned earlier, you have uh, control plane and the data plane, which is your workload node pools. Uh, right? So this is the control plane. This is the node pool set where you run your workload, and these are the connected Google Cloud services. Like these are external to your GKE cluster, and it will be maintained by you, right? So uh, these are some of the common services that GKE needs or uses for its while it gets created and it runs, right? So when you run a cluster, you need a VPC network wherein you will create your nodes. You will get the IP addresses for the nodes and stuff. So that's your VPC, and persistent disk is nothing but the storage volumes, disks, compute disks that you attach to your nodes for any type of storage. You need some place to store the images for your workloads, right? So basically, it's a your workloads will be container. So you use images for running your container. So those images you need some place to store. That's where persistent disk comes in. Or if you would like to have some kind of storage for your application, let's say you run uh, you host a database or some kind of uh, uh, web server, right? So those kind of applications you need some kind of storage to store files, application files, or any data. So for that purpose we use the persistent disk. There are different type of disk. Persistent disk is one of the commonly used and uh, basic storage medium for GKE. So other than that, you get to interact with load balancer as well. So basically, load balancers, as you might know, so it helps with uh, exposing your uh, Kubernetes workloads to your internal network or an external network, the internet, like so. So you have multiple instances of your multiple pods running as part of your deployment. You expose it via a service, and you would like to expose it to your internal network or an internet using public IP or a private IP. You most probably will be doing it as via a load balancer, which is the uh, common way of doing things in cloud. Uh, if you have used any other Kubernetes flavors, right? So yeah, load balancer is for traffic management, traffic distribution and stuff, right? So in cloud, that's that. And cloud operations, this is the operations suite. So basically, your logging services and monitoring services that you use to uh, store the logs from your Kubernetes workloads, or Kubernetes logs itself, the audit logs, or and also your metrics, Kubernetes cluster metrics, control plane metrics, your workload metrics. So everything. So that comes under the cloud operations suite, right? So that's the outside services that GKE interacts with. Now coming into the GKE architecture itself, the components that comprise it's part of the GKE environment, right? So basically, let's start with control plane. So the control plane, we have the API server. So the API server is the main service that you interact with when you would like to talk to a Kubernetes cluster, right? For example, you run any commands again to make any changes to your workloads. You mainly interact with the API server, and API server then interacts with the other components, and then it helps you with accomplishing that task or a specific action that you uh, uh, issue against the cluster, right? So that's the API server for you. So it basically uh, accepts any requests from the user, any administration request, any workload deployment, uh, any changes to the cluster, any other interaction that you make with the GKE cluster. It happens via the API server. It's the main entry point, the main service as part of the control plane. Uh, Next is the resource controller. So what resource controller does is it makes sure the cluster is always uh, maintained in the desired state, right? So that is one of the main motto of Kubernetes, right? So for example, if you create a deployment and put it on the cluster, saying that the deployment should have three replicas as part of the deployment definition. So then what the resource controller does is it makes sure that in any point of time, uh, there are three pods available for this specific deployment. So even if one pod goes down for any other reason, like the node on which the pod runs, it needs to be uh, removed from the cluster for any maintenance or anything, if whether the cluster node becomes unhealthy or something. So what the resource controller does is it immediately notes that the cluster is not in the desired state, that this particular deployment has only two pods running and the other pod is not healthy or unavailable. It makes sure that it schedules the make sure that the scheduler instructs for another pod to be scheduled in a node for this deployment, where it can find a place in a healthy node. So that's the resource controller. So it always makes sure that uh, the cluster is always maintained in the desired state. And moving to the scheduler. So the scheduler is kind of one of the important components in Kubernetes, right? So what does a scheduler do? So scheduler, it mainly handles the workload scheduling. Where does your uh, pod gets placed in the available compute instances? For if you are doing a new deployment, the scheduler will make a decision on where to put the uh, pod that's part of the deployment, right? Let's say uh, you deploy something, a workload with three replicas. So uh, the request goes to scheduler to ask where this pods needs to be scheduled for this specific deployment. So scheduler goes and looks at the all the available compute instances. It uh, looks into the resource utilization for each of the nodes. It decides which node is a better place to place your pod that's part of the deployed workload, right? So that's what scheduler does. It helps in scheduling your workload in the Kubernetes environment, right? So that's what the scheduler does. And storage. So storage basically here denotes the HCD server. So what is HCD in Kubernetes, right? So HCD is kind of a key value data store where your uh, where all the information about the cluster is gets stored. Like for example, like when you create a um, deployment or you create any Kubernetes resource, uh, it gets the information about that gets stored in the HCD server, and then API server talks with the HCD server whenever other components need any of this information uh, to be available for that components to make sure the cluster remains in the uh, desired state, or any information that needs about the uh, cluster, the manifest for the deployments, everything gets stored in the HCD server. So basically, HCD is kind of a data store for your Kubernetes cluster control plane. So, yep. And so, moving to the next, the nodes. This is the data plane, right? This is the control plane, and this is the data plane. This is where your workload gets posted, your pods run, uh, your parts are based on this section wherein you have the compute instances part of the node pools. So yeah, that's pretty much it. This is where your workloads is hosted. Whenever you schedule some Kubernetes workload on GKE. Uh, and the other outside components are here we have the user. The user can be an admin user or Kubernetes user who deploys the workloads. Right? There are different types of users who consume the Kubernetes services, right? Uh, so that's the user mentioned here, and kubectl. So what is kubectl, right? So it's the Kubernetes control. or you can say command line tool, right? So kubectl, you use kubectl to interact with the API server. So API server, basically it understands only API calls, requests, and it talks in the API language, right? So but a user can't always make an API call for each and every small thing. He can't make an API call. It's a complex thing to do. So that's where you have kubectl to help you. So you issue some instructions to the API server using the kubectl command line. So, for example, if you would have to create a new deployment, you use the kubectl command. I think it's kubectl create deploy the deployment name, and you give the uh, what image needs to be used for the container that's part of this, that will be part of the deployment. And you can also set the number of replicas, hyphen hyphen replicas equal to the number of replicas, and also the namespace where you would like to have the workload deployed to. So these kind of things, you if you have to write it as an API call, it requires a lot of time and uh, code, right? So kubectl makes it easy for you to run it as a easy command, issue as a easy command, so that in the back end it converts it, the command that the instructions that you provide as part of the command into a uh, API call, and then it instructs sends the instruction to the API server, and then it further gets processed further, right? So that's the QCDL component here. So as you can see here, there are some color codes mentioned here. So uh, the blue area, which is the control plane, it's a GKE managed one. So what GKE managed means, Google manages it for you. So irrespective of what mode you choose, autopilot mode, standard mode, uh, Google takes care of the control plane components. They maintain it. They make sure it's available for you based on the availability you choose, and they patch the nodes, control plane nodes, and those kind of things, right? And the yellow area here, it's what you call as the data plane, right? So if in case as we earlier saw, there is an autopilot mode and a standard mode. So with the standard mode, the node pools are mostly user managed. The user creates the node pool, what type of compute instances you need as part of the node pool. The user configures the network settings, the storage information, the operating system details. That's part of that the nodes part of the node pool uses, and those things, right? So basically, if it's a standard mode cluster, it is user managed, and when you choose an autopilot mode, then it is Google managed. So that's what it mentions, right? So that's pretty much here. Let's move to the next slide. So here we talk about the GKE editions. So GKE, Google offers GKE in two editions. So basically, the one is a standard edition, and the other one is a enterprise edition. Yeah. So let's start with the standard edition. So what is standard edition? So with the standard edition, GKE provides you with the core Kubernetes functionalities, like uh, you get to use their backup and restore functionalities, and you get to use the automated cluster upgrade functionalities, those kind of basic level of functionalities that's needed for your GKE cluster to function properly, and for you to use the GKE in an efficient way. So the standard set of uh, features uh, that are needed for the GKE to function, right? So the cluster to function effectively. So those comes as part of the GKE standard edition. So The next one is the enterprise edition. So the enterprise edition is nothing but it offers much more functionalities, right? That Google specifically offers with uh, the GKE service. So on top of the core functionalities, Kubernetes functionalities, the enterprise edition gives you additional features like you get a managed service mesh. So managed service mesh is nothing like you the traffic. It's a like if in case you have worked in Kubernetes before, you might know and come across Istio, uh, which is a service mesh which helps you to uh, route the traffic, manage the traffic that comes into the cluster or that flows within the cluster. Right. So service mesh is helps you with the traffic management. Uh, Controlling how the traffic flows from one part to another part, or the traffic that's coming from outside into the cluster, how the traffic flows reaches your pod, and those kind of things, right? So my friend has been making a good set of videos related to this. I'll put a card and also put a link to his channel in the description for you. So if you would like to go and take a look at it, will be helpful, lot helpful for you. So the other thing is fleet-based cluster management. So this is something like you get to manage if you have a lot of Kubernetes clusters which you would like to group together and effectively manage it. So you can use the fleet feature, right? So you can combine put all these clusters into your into a single fleet, and it will help you to effectively manage the clusters that's part of the fleet. Kind of grouping the clusters for effective management, and also it provides you with additional functionalities, additional features that makes uh, uh, coordinating, like connecting your services for your services to talk to services in another cluster to be very efficient and to be implemented in a easier way. So that's how fleet helps you uh, here. So and also policy controller is it's something like you can enforce some policies on your clusters, and uh, you can enforce security policies, or if you would like to enforce some set of standards on the cluster, you can make possible with the policy controller. And GKE, or with GKE Enterprise, you can also run your GKE cluster on an AWS or Azure cloud environment. So basically, you have to configure the authentication, how GKE authenticates with your AWS cloud or Azure cloud, how it creates the uh, uh, compute power, that's compute storage and other resources that's needed for the Kubernetes cluster to be hosted on the AWS or Azure cloud. You have to configure the uh, permissions and stuff, and then you can host your cluster, GKE cluster on an AWS environment or Azure cloud environment. So these videos are also my friend has covered in his channel. I'll link it in the description. And there are some security features like binary authorization. Also, you can make use of with the GKE Enterprise Edition. So that's pretty much the difference between a standard GKE cluster and a GKE Enterprise cluster, right? So these are the additional features you get out of the Enterprise subscription. So obviously, Enterprise subscription comes with additional costs. So we'll discuss this in the pricing video. Moving over to the next slide. So will be as I mentioned before, GKE automatically patches your cluster, right? So you can GKE even uh, Google even automatically patches your node pools. So you can uh, subscribe to a release channel. So these are the set of release channels that are available. So when you subscribe to a release channel, Google periodically releases the new Kubernetes versions based on the channel you choose. Right. So that way you can schedule maintenance windows. You can schedule maintenance windows for your node pool upgrades, wherein you get a maintenance window from you have an agreed maintenance window, and then you configure it so that uh, Google upgrades the node pools during this defined window so that you don't have any outages for your workloads. So that is also possible. So these are the different release channels that Google provides you with: rapid, regular, stable, extended, and node channel. So we'll talk about these release channels more in detail in a different video. So, uh, an overview: rapid is, as you see, you get uh, your cluster upgraded to a newer releases as soon as it becomes generally available, and then it's been tested for some time by the open source community, right? So, and regular is the most recommended channel out of the release channel. So it's like uh, you get to upgrade, you get to have your cluster upgraded to a newer version after some testing happens in the rapid channel, right? So, and then the stable one, this is where you should use uh, your production clusters. You need to use it's recommended to use the stable channel for your production cluster so that you don't get to face any issues with the new releases, as those get ironed out in this previous two release channels. uh, and then it promotes to stable version. You get the upgrade here, so it's always good to put your production cluster in the stable release channel. And the extended release channel is something where you need extended support for the version that you are on, and you don't have to upgrade your cluster until unless there is a end of support comes for the Kubernetes version. You can put it on the extended channel. And no channel means you don't prefer to have your GKE node pools upgraded, and you would like to do it on your own cadence, right? So that at that time you can put it on a no channel release channel. Yep. So as I mentioned, GKE offers the flexibility for the consumer to enroll the cluster to a suitable release channel that offers the required upgrade pattern. So it's completely based on your comfortableness with Kubernetes upgrade guidance. If in case you have been following one before, you can, based on your comfortableness, you can pick the release channel, and then you can set the maintenance window for the upgrade to happen. Pretty much about the release channel. So here we see what are the benefits in using GKE, right? Uh, so these benefits are we are talking here about uh, using GKE over a vanilla Kubernetes cluster, not the other cloud Kubernetes offerings, right? So one of the benefit is managed control planes with high availability options. So as I mentioned, irrespective of what edition you use, standard or enterprise edition, your uh, uh, standard or enterprise edition or standard or autopilot cluster, uh, your control plane is managed by Google. The patching is taken care of by Google. The Kubernetes upgrade version upgrades are taken care by Google, and they also provide you with high availability options. Like you can have a zonal cluster or a regional cluster wherein your control planes are distributed across the regions, right? So though this is one of the uh, good benefits. And automated upgrade release management through maintenance window configuration. This also we discussed in the previous slide. Uh, you can subscribe to a release channel, and then you can put a configure a maintenance window wherein Google makes sure that your node pools get upgraded during the maintenance window whenever there is a new version of Kubernetes available in that release channel, right? So that's another benefit. Um Simplified node management via node pool configuration. So as we talked about, you can with uh, with your standard cluster. Can uh, with your standard cluster, you can customize your node pool configurations to your own liking, and based on the workload you have, uh, you can customize the node pools for that specific workload and schedule that workload in that specific node pool that's configured for its own usage, right? So that's a additional benefit. Node pools enable you to easily manage the compute and storage resources that's needed for the GKE Kubernetes workloads, right? So that's a benefit. And GKE offers you a robust security options to ensure deployment of workloads, ensure secure deployment of workloads. So GKE comes in with a lot of security options, right? Like one we discussed, the binary authorization. You can enforce some certain set of policies for the container that gets deployed in the GKE cluster. Um, you can also apply security policies, certain type of policies to your cluster, and then based on which your workloads need to be deployed. Um, so and also, GKE provides Google provides you with vulnerability insights for your workloads that gets deployed on the GKE cluster. So that's another security option that's available with GKE. Uh, and to the next point, advanced enterprise level management features for effective management of Kubernetes workloads at scale. So as we discussed about this point in the enterprise edition of Kubernetes GKE, right? So you get a lot of additional features for you to effectively manage your Kubernetes deployments if you run Kubernetes workloads at scale, right? Google provides a lot of effective features that you can make use of to make your uh, management and operational work on the Kubernetes uh, a smooth experience, a easy one. It reduces the effort you put in this area, right? So that's additional benefit as well, and you get a tighter integration with uh, the Google Cloud services like load balancing, storage, and SQL. Cloud SQL, you can host your databases. If in case your Kubernetes workload success needs a database, you can create a Google Cloud SQL database in the flavor that you need, and then uh, you can easily make it available for access for your Kubernetes GKE workloads, right? So there's a tighter integration with other Google Cloud services uh, for your GKE workloads. That's also available as an additional benefit. So yeah, so that's pretty much the introduction about GKE. Uh, so yeah, let's dive into more in depth in further videos. So subscribe to the channel. So yeah, thanks for your time.